Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Rose.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
Welcome to our reaction interview for The White Lotus, Season 3, Episode 6. Well, this was disgusting, wasn't it, everybody? There was talk about throwing up in this episode, and I think that's probably what a lot of us wanted to do at certain points over the course of this.
Absolutely. 2 buckets for this episode. And this is not by any means the first time that the White Lotus has tried to make us all feel uncomfortable with the show. They've done that a bunch of times in the past. This definitely was the moment that had the most of an ick factor for me. And it is also not the first time that we have come across, brotherly love or siblings, whatever. We've watched Game of Thrones. There's lots of that that's going on over there as well. But this just hit differently in all the worst ways. This was the most difficult episode to get through.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of, psychologists out there on their armchairs being like, well, why was this more uncomfortable than X, Y, and Z? I think the Game of Thrones comparison here is that, yeah, there's a ton of ick throughout Game of Thrones.
Yes.
But it's also a situation, though, that it's a fantasy world. They have sort of established, like, oh, this is common in these families. Not that makes it okay, but I think it's just that the White Lotus, there's like a semblance of reality here. And not to say that I am going to like extremely fancy resorts in Thailand or Hawaii or whatever else, but we can still kind of relate and understand these characters. Like, it's still presumably set in the real world. So when you see something like what happened with Saxon and Loch, it's enough to make you want to just like go under a sink and just wash your eyes out and hope that the memory burns away.
Crawling out of my skin. I just couldn't. I can't.
No.
It's so uncomfortable.
No, I mean, this episode was very uncomfortable. It was also very funny at times. It's also pretty meaningful. I know that there was a lot of hype around episode 5 going into it, but I actually think this is a better episode than episode 5. I think we really are starting to move forward a lot of these stories in a way that's super interesting. I think we can have even more theories now about the infamous moment that we saw back in episode 1 and what's going on there.
Yeah, it feels like this episode is really building up to that pinnacle of where our groups of people are becoming extremely unhinged.
Extremely. Well, we are going to get into all of it. Before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button because we have a couple more episodes still to go in the White Lotus Season 3. We've also got previews and theories of this show. We don't want you to miss any of that coverage. Also, the moment that the White Lotus is over, The Last of Us is coming to HBO. We are going to be knee deep in all sorts of coverage of that show, and we don't want you guys to miss that.
Absolutely. We're going to be bringing you The Last of Us videos 3 times a week with reviews and previews and theories. There's all going to be all kinds of fun stuff. We are also going to be covering Handmaid's Tale here. We're in the middle of Yellow Jackets. There's so much going on here at the channel, so hit that subscribe button. Also, over on our Patreon, we'll leave a link for you below. It's a great way to be able to support us and get even more coverage of the White Lotus as well as The Pit, which is airing on Max, Bosch Legacy starting up very soon, and we are going to be covering Andor for all you Star Wars fans. Only over at our Patreon, those 3 shows. So thank you so much to everyone who is supporting us over there.
Thank you guys. We really, really appreciate that.
Okay, so they are really ramping up these stories and the infighting that's going on or the different thinking that's going on. Now we have the 2 brothers and, you know, them dealing with their feelings about what happened, and we will get into what happened. Tim is dealing with his wife being like, I'd rather not live than not have money. It's a terrible accent. I'll never do that again. I'm so sorry. So now he's thinking, okay, well, is that the way to go then? Do I do this to myself, do this to her, take out the family? And we have everything that is going on with Rick. He also has a gun. He is also becoming unhinged. And now we have the trio of friends that are all falling apart because of what Jaclyn did. Everything is really building up.
Yeah, there's a lot of different possibilities as to where all of this could end up going. And you're adding on top of all of this now the fact that Guy Talk has the gun back, everybody.
Yes!
Guy Talk has gotten a little bit of training, apparently, as to how to prepare for severe situations. I'm going to put on the tinfoil hat now because now that we know that Guy Talk has the gun again and he's got a little bit of training for it, I kind of feel like we're going to have a good / bad ending at the end of this season now, where something bad is going to happen at the resort. Guy Talk is going to rush in and being like, I got this. I got the training. He's going to fire, and he's going to end up killing the wrong person. And
Oh no!
maybe he ends up killing the right person too. Maybe there is like 2 people who die, but this is Guy Talk. Guy Talk has proven to not be good at any facet of his job, that I kind of feel like it would be very much in the tone of the White Lotus. It's like, okay, we got rid of the bad person, but we also killed somebody else along the way.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, yeah, he has a day of training.
Yes.
You know, it's not that far in the future here that this is going to happen. So what is he going to have, a couple days of training? It's not that much training. So
No.
if he's actually able to hit the right person, great. Could he be hitting a bunch of the wrong people as well? Absolutely. He just doesn't have enough training for this.
And we don't know how good Guy Talk is going to be in these sort of clutch moments. It might be somebody where he could hit a 3-pointer in practice and he's wide open from the 3-point line in the game and he just airballs it. Like, I do not trust Guy Talk to necessarily execute the right thing at any given point. Now, I will say this. I think he's going to try. I think he means well. I think he's a nice person. I've come off the Guy Talk is a bad guy train now.
Oh, good.
But at the same time, yeah, I know. It's like, great. But even though you mean well, that does not mean you're going to actually do anything right.
Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and talk about these brothers and what happened.
Okay, all right.
Chelsea, my girl, I'm giving you your flowers. I didn't like that you kissed. Chloe, you didn't need to do that, but I'm very glad that you pulled the shoot and you had nothing to do with what went on with the 3 of them, where it looks like Chloe was hooking up with Locke, and Locke was doing something to his brother. We won't get into the details. We all watched it. To the point of the ending, where the brothers looked at each other in the eyes, which is the part that made it like even more weird than it already was. But the aftermath of all of this, where Saxon's just like, I don't really remember what happened. And Chloe and Chelsea are laying it out, being like, how do you not remember this? This is like such a pretty crazy moment. Like, unless you and your brother are doing this on the regular and you're just like, oh, it's just another Saturday night with the brothers. Like, how do you not remember this happening? But it does start to come back to them a little by little. Locke didn't remember either, but he remembered later, was like, oh no. So what the fallout is going to be, I mean, I don't know. They're already kind of not talking, but Saxon remembered earlier. So he is dealing with it quite badly. Like, is he going to be able to continue to live with what he's done, be around his brother? Is that the end of their brother relationship altogether? He's just never going to speak to him again. I mean, I could see something like that happening.
Definitely no protein shake making for the brother going on moving forward. I think this is it's a really hard thing to discuss, not just because of how uncomfortable it is, but just because it's something that is so specific and so traumatic, where it's really hard to relate or understand. It's like, okay, what are people going to do in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, even Chelsea's saying, like, I've partied a lot, but I've never partied to the point that I'm hooking up with my brother. Like, I'm always have my faculties well enough to know that that's not a thing.
Yeah, Chelsea, number 1, you smart. Number 2, you continue to be the most likable person on this show. I'm so happy you did not go full tilt with these people.
Yeah, because the other thing that I found really interesting that I think could be setting Saxon up to maybe be the person that either goes on this rampage or just can't find himself at all. She calls him soulless. Yeah. I mean, he's saying, why didn't you just hook up with me? And she's like, well, I'm in love with Rick. Like, I'm not here to be with you. Being with you is just empty nothingness. Like, why would I give myself to you when I have my soulmate who is Rick, who I love, and also you're soulless? I was like, ooh, that's really hard on somebody who then just hooked up with their brother.
If we're to go down, I think this rabbit hole that, okay, Saxon ends up the person going on the rampage. I think number one is exactly what you've lined up here. This moment is going to stick with him. Obviously, the moment with this brother is going to stick with him. And
Forever. It's forever changed him.
yeah, and then on top of all this, like the one thing we know about Saxon beyond just his apparent superficial love for hooking up with people is just that he's very entrenched in his father's business and he cares a lot about this. This is how he's identifying himself. If he finds out what's happening with his dad in this investigation and basically his entire professional future has been ruined, he's going to be in a spot where it's like, okay, I have no professional future. I have no personal future because it's been forever haunted by what happened with my brother. It's like, what am I at this point? This is not a good place to have an identity crisis, this middle of this resort where there's dangerous people around. It just doesn't feel like it's going to go well.
No, I think that soulless comment is the thing that hit him the most. I know that's saying a lot because he hooked up with his brother, but I think for him, he has just been this rudderless ship that's only has his job and he doesn't have anything else. And if his daddy hadn't brought him into this profession, he'd have nothing. He doesn't know who he is. He's extremely insecure. He's come across that way anyways to me, where he's like, protein shakes and, you know, bro this, bro that, women this, women that. He doesn't have anything that's him or himself. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't have an identity. No. And I think that being called soulless is the thing that's really, you know, going to tip all of this over the edge to be like, okay, if I'm soulless and then I've done this with my brother and everything does fall apart with this job, then what do I have? I'm nothing.
It's just, there's some blissful irony that goes on in this episode where his identity is based on these very, very superficial things. And elsewhere in this episode, we see when it comes to Timothy talking about Piper and her potentially staying at this monastery, he's like, maybe it'll be good for her to have something else going on in her life, something a little bit deeper, not really understanding that he's basically talking about his son, who is Mr. Privilege, who has had every single thing in his life handed to him to the point where he's never had to struggle and never had to think about anything else.
Yeah, that's the thing with Tim. I think that talk that he had with the monk at the monastery was obviously more about him than it was about Piper. Like, Piper is there to really figure out if she wants to be there. Victoria's like, oh yeah, I've looked around, you know, this is going to be a real struggle for you because you're not going to have any of your comforts. So yeah, stay here the night and see if you can make it through one night. If you can make it through one night, no problem, because she has no faith that her kids can live without their comforts, even for one night. And I think that Piper will be able to, but Victoria just doesn't feel that that's the case. And I think that that's something that's really starting to sink in with Tim, because he's going to lose all his money, which means that his kids are not going to be able to function. His wife is not going to be able to function. That money is the thing that makes this family a family.
This is the best episode, I think, for Timothy Ratliff that we've seen. And I think Jason's incredible in this episode. Yes, I think really he's starting to kind of realize that Piper may be the only one of his kids that he can actually kind of save in a way where she might be able to go on and have something more. The scene with Timothy and the monks, and since you brought it up, this is the best scene of the whole episode to me anyway. And basically what the monk is saying, and I'll say this, spoiler alert for a show that ended many years ago, but this is almost identical to what Chidi says to Eleanor in the series finale of The Good Place, which is one of my favorite series finales of all time. And there's a part of me that wanted to sort of be like, okay, this can't live up to the waves coming back to the ocean. But it's just like the sentiment behind both speeches is just so moving and so impactful. And I think it really comes down to Tim hearing this at a time in which he needed to hear it, where he's a part of this greater ocean of life, but he's also a part of something that's going to continue to impact his children, and that no matter how much time he has left and no matter what his own personal future may be, he still has a chance to impart something on someone else close to him. He can make their future different. And I don't know how deeply it's all seeping in, but I just find him saying what he does to kind of enable Piper is just that there's a beautiful sentiment behind it. And I don't know if it's going to work for Piper or not. I mean, maybe Victoria's right when she's just like, it is grim, but I kind of think she's blowing it out of proportion.
She absolutely is. I mean, she's living the lap of luxury. So, a twin bed in a room with nothing is probably, roughing it,
Yeah.
for her. But it was very interesting too, watching Tim sort of ask about death and what happens afterwards. And as a former funeral director, I get that question a lot as well. I don't have any answers, so, don't ask. But for him, it's interesting to hear him say that because this is a family of Christians. They're supposed to know what happens. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be going to heaven afterwards. And for him asking, what happens after I die, to be like, oh, this is what happens. Death is like this happy return. It's like coming home, one consciousness, no more suffering. That
Yeah.
it's a different answer than, oh, well, you're going to go up to heaven and everything's going to be grand. And him hearing this seemed to give him more peace than what he's been believing all this time.
The big winner of this season so far may actually just be Buddhism, because
I
it feels like a lot of these principles are getting through to these people. But I think a lot of it just comes down to, rather than necessarily being a commentary on one specific religion, it's just that a lot of these characters have come to Thailand with this very, very limited worldview, and especially the Ratliffs, where they're not really willing to see kind of outside of themselves. And I think Timothy now is allowing himself to think a little bit about that. Now, does that mean he's going to get out of this season alive? No, it's very well possible that what happens at the end of this season is the authorities come and that they're the source of this standoff. Like, anything is still possible there.
And this dinner before we leave this family. The boys have been invited by Gary, who is seemingly upset or not upset that Chloe has hooked up with one or both of them. It's actually really hard to tell because I feel like Greg Gary doesn't really care about anything. He just doesn't want anybody making him look like a clown is what I really feel like it is. He's just into protecting himself. He's upset that she took out the boat without him, even though she's like, I invited you, like you could have stayed, but you just didn't want to. And he's kind of like, okay, that's fine. I didn't want to. That doesn't mean that you go and do it anyways, kind of thing. Like, you can still have respect for me. And it feels like that's a thing that Greg really wants. He wants to protect himself. He wants respect. He doesn't want people making him look like a clown.
Yeah.
He is having this really weird dinner party now with his woman, the guys that his woman has hooked up with. He has now also invited Belinda for no real reason. Is this the place that you really want to have a talk with her? Is he just planning to just have everybody to this dinner of death and he's just going to kill everybody? Because that's what it's kind of feeling like. I'm going to invite all my enemies to this dinner and everybody's just going to die. Poison fruit. Ah!
So that's got to be coming back. Listen, that's way more likely coming back than the monkeys. So I think that's very much out there still. I do think that Greg is somebody who cares a lot about money and power, because this was a big motivation behind what he does with Tanya. Obviously, he wanted her money, but I think he also wants that feeling of, okay, I was just this government worker. I was just sort of this shadow in one part of my life. I'm still a shadow to the point where, you know, I'm living kind of separate from America in my own little pocket where people have their secrets. But I basically got something where I can go around on my boat. Everybody knows who I am. Everyone caters to what I want. And I think it's kind of what you're saying. He doesn't want anybody to think that he's less than or that he's embarrassed in some way. I think there's probably a part of him that's not shocked about the fact that this, you know, younger woman that he's with would be interested perhaps in some people beyond just him because of the superficial relationship that they have. But he still doesn't want it dangled in front of his face. So I think
on his boat.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, I'm not here defending Greg.
Yeah.
But I understand why he's just like, okay, I didn't want to go, but you took my boat and you took these boys out and you did this on my boat that I pay for. Like, I completely understand why he feels the way he feels.
The good news for Lockie, at least, and it's the only time I'm going to say good news for Lockie in this video, is that seemingly he's spending the night at the monastery, right? Unless Saxon comes and like pulls him out of there, he might be spared from this. But where I think it could be going for Gary is just that maybe he just wants to intimidate Saxon, make Saxon feel really, really small, make him feel
Yeah.
pathetic, just
Yes.
like emotionally wear him down. He's just such a creepy, uncomfortable dude. Like, and we've talked about this, and it was echoed in this episode too, that like Chloe knows, at least to some extent, what it is that he is capable of.
Yes, because he has asked her for her help to be
Yeah.
like, I need you to get these boys up here for this dinner. Like, we don't know how much else he's asked for as far as help. I mean, he dealt with the Belinda situation himself to
Yeah.
invite her to this dinner. Whether she goes or not, I don't know. She's contemplating it, but like, I don't know why she would go. There's no real
Yeah.
motivation. Like, you already know. So, what's the point of going there? And you know what he's capable of. He's capable of murder. Hey, you want to come have dinner? No, I absolutely don't. Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, I don't understand. It's just like if you do go, make sure you're surrounded by a lot of people at all times so that there are constant witnesses.
But that's the thing, right? You're going to his
Yeah.
place where everything is his stuff, his land, his whatever, right? Like, if I'm Belinda and it's like, okay, Gary, Greg, you want to
Yeah.
have this conversation? Cool. We're going to have it at the restaurant at the White Lotus.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to your house where you can bury me in the ocean behind it.
Yeah. Have it at the restaurant in the White. This will be a great distraction from having to hear Fabian give his performance. I hate Fabian. I'm just
Oh,
gonna say this.
wow.
Right. This smug idiot goes to her and has this
Oh my God.
conversation after he is basically like, no, I don't really care about anything you have to say whatsoever. You're just gonna have to stomach. After you are so condescending, you then go to her and then you're just like, you should really come to this dinner so you can hear me sing. I'm just like, shut up. You're probably not a good singer. You're just full of yourself. You're acting like you singing is this great main event where you may suck. Nobody knows. You haven't sung. It's just the audacity of this guy to go to her after this and be like, yes, you should come to this, but mostly just so that you can hear me sing. If the choice is for Belinda, you're going to go to Greg's place where he may kill you, or go to Fabian where you have to listen to Fabian. Okay, it's not really a tough choice, but there's a part of me that's just like, is there a winning choice here?
Yes, don't go to either. Don't go to either. Just hang out with your son.
Okay, there are two things in this episode. As much as I love a lot of it, that I kind of have a couple of questions about in terms
Okay.
of realism. One of them is, okay, Zion, you show up, you're on this long flight, you turn up, you kind of just like barge into this room. You're very, very bold to barge into a room at this particular point. Nothing else. Also, your reaction to what's going on here, I feel like most sons would freak out at least 10 times more than you did. You were surprisingly okay.
I feel like he's an adult and she's an adult. It's not like he walked in and caught them in the act. They're just at that point,
Yeah.
cuddling in bed. That's not that big a thing. It might be different if he caught them in the middle of it and was like, oh, cool, I can't unsee that. But they're just like laying around. So it's not anything too crazy.
He's still got a lot of emotional maturity. Like that, I don't know
Hey,
what.
he wants his mom to be happy. I like that a lot. Zion, you're all right with me.
I like Zion. Zion seems like a nice enough kid, which makes me, I guess I'm glad that he's not apparently going to get taken out into the finale, at least
Yes.
at first. The other thing as we go over to the Rick storyline now is
Yes.
that it's asking a lot of Sitala at this point, that she is buying into this whole scheme of like, oh, my guy is coming, he's coming, let's go to your house in order to make it happen. This is not the most well thought of plan that I've ever seen or heard of.
Listen, I also have background in filmmaking. I was a filmmaker for a long time, and in that industry, people can be strange and they are also flaky. So I think she probably, having done a bunch of movies or doing some stuff in the past, understands when Rick is like, yeah, he was supposed to show up, but you know how it is. They're eccentric, they're flaky, they do this, they do that. And she's like, Yeah, I get it. I was like, yeah, me too. I've seen it. It happens. So for Rick to kind of move it into this to be like, okay, I can get him to, come to your place. He wants to, breathe in who you are at your home. I understand why she's buying into it because it is not far-fetched.
I think that's the thing, is just that for me, outside of this world, I have a hard time understanding it, but I'm outside of this world, and I think clearly Sita is this woman who has lived a long life, had a lot of experiences. She clearly loves performing. She had that performance at the hotel.
Yep.
She's probably thinking, okay, maybe this could be another act for me, another chance to have my career. I think
Of course.
maybe some of my disdain is just coming from the fact that I wanted more Walton in this episode, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more Walton coming. I still feel like we haven't gotten to like his big point of the story yet.
Yeah, that feels like that is coming up very soon. I mean, this just felt like this is the setup where Rick needed to get her to let him in the house. I'll bring the director, Frank, who's
Yes.
playing the director, and they get to the house and you hear Jim's voice, and that's the end of the episode. So I feel like it's going to be coming up. They had to set the table for this for him to actually find his way into her house.
Let's move now though into pure excellence, because we
Pure
have all
excellence.
we have all had our criticisms and or fears that nothing is happening when it comes to the three friends for a little while.
Yep.
Laurie, let's just say the switch has been turned on for Laurie, and Laurie is now going full Laurie. Carrie, you're finally getting your moment in the sun on this show.
I completely understand.
Yes.
Like, a lot of us have had friends that are like this, where they feel good by taking something from their friend so that they can feel like, oh, well, I can get this guy, but my friend can't, or I can whatever. I've got the cool car, but my friend doesn't, so I feel better about myself. And that usually ends in 10th grade. By the time you're in your 40s, like, most women don't keep those friends around anymore, and we look for the real ones where it's like, oh man, you got this great guy. I'm actually happy for you. You got a raise. Let's celebrate with some mochi nut. I'm so happy for you. That's what happens when you grow up. But because Jaclyn has not grown out of this, she is still doing this. And I really like that Laurie is done with it, that she's calling it out. Yeah, Kate saw Valentine leaving your room. Oh, nothing happened. Oh, okay, nothing happened. You just had this hot guy in your room all night long to what? Have a tea? Stop it. Of course something happened.
Yeah, something happened. They all know somewhere that obviously something happened.
And I love that Laurie called out that Jaclyn has been doing this since 10th grade, that this has been going on and on and on. She's just like, and now you're 45. Like, when does it end and the friendship kind of actually start?
I think that's the problem with certain friend dynamics, is that you hope for things to change, but you're also at the same time trying to recreate like a magic that existed when you were 16 or 17, when people change, people evolve. They don't have the same belief systems. Like, the show has played this out a little bit with these women already, and now it is all at this point where it's coming to a head, and these warts are showing back up, and they're all kind of just questioning, like, okay, how do we deal with all this while superficially there's this facade that's trying to be kept up? Like, it is incredibly amusing to me that Valentine, who I don't know how much sleep this guy has had, but he's just wandering around the resort acting like nothing is happening, and he's just like, so ladies, what would you like to have done today? And they're just like, okay, come on, dude, we're gonna do our own thing. And he's just like, well, you know where I am. It's like, okay, come on. But that's the part of this world where there's this like conflict between the superficial and the actual, where I think at least Laurie's realizing that none of this is actually real. I think Kate's trying to kind of suppress it a little bit, but she knows that it's there too.
Yeah, I think all three of them know that it's there. Typically, if you're kind of stuck in that type of a friendship where you guys had a friendship decades ago, but now you're all in these different places in your life, and the outside of what Jaclyn is doing, where she's like, oh, I'm better than my friend. I use my friend and put her down so that I can feel better. That absolutely happens in
Yes.
friend dynamics. But outside of that, it does feel like there was friendship there in the past. But now that they are all in these different places in life, I feel like we've all been there with people. You've been friends with them for 20 years. You know,
Yeah.
the relationship, there's nothing really that wrong with it, but you are in different places and the friendship just isn't there anymore.
No.
And it's okay to let it go. But I think here, Laurie needed a real reason to let it go. And this is the reason where she's like, wow, man, you are stuck in 10th grade. We are all in our 40s now. Like, do I want to deal with this going into
Yeah.
my 50s and 60s and 70s where she is still going to be doing this? This isn't friendship.
I think the other real part of it, I think that's really frustrating for Laurie at this point is just that Jaclyn's not owning up to it. And I think it would be one thing if she was just full on transparent. She'd still be upset. Like, she would still be like, this has been happening since I was a kid.
Right.
But you're trying to treat her like she's dumb, and Laurie's not dumb. Like, Laurie's gonna kind of figure out a lot of this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and now it's all going to be about what is Laurie going to do? Is she going to continue to call it out? Is she
Yeah.
going to try to like expose what's going on? Or is she just going to pull the chute and be like, we're not friends anymore?
I think that's probably where they're going at the very least by the end of the season. I would think so. There's only one more thought I have in the midst of all of this, though, and it goes to Laurie's man here back at home being just like, oh yeah, my phone died. It's just like, you were on set and your phone, you were telling me that no one in a crew of hundreds had a phone charger.
Yeah, I mean, Jaclyn, is she gonna believe this? It could be the truth. It could not be the truth. I mean, who knows?
There's clearly something wrong in that relationship, and maybe that is an impetus behind some of what Jaclyn does. It's hard to say, though.
It's hard to know because, I mean, it seems like he really did just have his phone go out and he's just like, yeah, sorry, but, I really miss you and I hope to see you soon. So it's possible that is all that's happened.
Yeah, and if that is all that's happened, it might be a situation where with him, it's like, okay, this is no big deal. But because Jaclyn was in this kind of insecure place because of everything that had happened over the course of that day, that ends up making it a big deal in her head. And then you get Valentin, and then you have everything that completely snowballs from there.
Yeah, because she does not seem like she feels bad about what she did with Valentin at all. She's, Jaclyn's out here just talking to her man like everything is normal and fine. So this tells me this is not the first time that she has done this to make herself feel better when she feels insecure, when he just happens to not be around, or even past relationships.
Yeah,
Jaclyn is trash.
Jaclyn's the worst. Well, actually, I don't know if she's because who is the
Out
worst?
of that group,
Okay,
she
yeah.
is trash.
There's a real big ranking system. Okay, moving into the final episodes here. Here are some of the people who I like and I'm legitimately rooting for. Chelsea, Belinda,
Guy talk.
Guy. We're rooting for Guy Talk.
I am.
I like
And Mook.
okay, yeah, I'll root for them.
I just like them so much.
I want to like them. I just feel like I have no faith in you, Guy Talk. I feel like you're just gonna ruin everything.
But he's going to try to do the right thing. I feel it in my heart. Watching him go through that room looking for that gun,
Yeah.
I was like, is he going to have to pull every single drawer out to get it? I love that the show was like, nope, first drawer.
Okay, listen, Guy Talk. Something was working for you here, something. But we'll see where everything goes in these upcoming episodes.
Yeah.
We have a lot more White Lotus coverage coming, including a preview for episode 7.
Yep.
Big theory discussion. Hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss that. Support us further. Join our Patreon. We have a link in the description. We've got exclusive video coverage of The Pit coming up, Bosch Legacy, Andor. Thank you guys. We'll see you here next time.